Week 6 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few batters I would look to add this week. The first guy is Miguel Rojas of the Miami Marlins. So Rojas, we've seen it throughout his career. This guy can hit for a good batting average. He gets on base, he scores runs, and so far in the early going here, 32 of 112, 2 home runs, 12 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 22 runs scored, a 286 batting average, and a nice 370 on base. But over the last few weeks, he's been tearing it up. Here is Miguel Rojas, 13 of 44, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, a 295 batting average, a 354 on base, and 11 runs scored. And in the last week, he's batted 458. So right now, he's on a hot streak here. And this Marlins team, they bat him first, and he's their table setter. And obviously, I know this Marlins team, they don't score many runs. But Miguel Rojas, he still gets the job done, and this guy should be added in a lot more fantasy leagues. The last couple games for him, May 7th versus Milwaukee, 2 for 3 with 3 runs. May 8th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 4 with a homer in that one. And May 9th, 1 for 5 yesterday. So now they go to Arizona here, is this Miami Marlins team. And this Arizona team, they look like one of the worst teams in all of Major League Baseball, in my opinion. They can't field, they can't hit, they definitely can't pitch. And I think Rojas, this hot streak will continue for him. And right now, he's been added already in 14% of fantasy leagues. And he should be owned in more, where he's still available right now in 67% of fantasy leagues. The next play is Adolis Garcia of the Texas Rangers. So Garcia, he's been a huge surprise so far this year for this Texas Ranger team. And this guy, he's got huge power, and he's really driving the ball all over the field here. And in the last couple nights here, he's gone up already 20% in fantasy leagues. So right now, he's only available in 32%. So if you're listening to this video and Garcia's out there in your league, you definitely should go out there and get him. So far in the season, 30 of 101. Already 9 home runs, top 5 in the home run leaderboard. 26 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, a 297 batting average, and a 340 on base with 16 runs scored. So Garcia, he's the traditional power hitter here in 2021, where he's going to strike out a bunch of times. He's going to hit home, swing for the fences. But right now, he's been red hot here in the last week alone. 4 home runs, 12 RBIs, 6 runs scored, a 464 batting average, and a 500 on base percentage here in 28 at-bats in the last week. So right now, he's tough to stop, and he's been a big bopper for this Texas Ranger team, batting 4th or 5th. So the last few games here for Garcia, May 6th at Minnesota, 1 for 4 with a run. May 7th, 2 for 4 with an RBI. May 8th versus Seattle, 2 for 4 with 2 runs and a homer and a stolen base. And then yesterday he went off versus Seattle, 3 for 4 with a homer and 5 RBIs. Texas Ranger team, they go to San Francisco for 2 in Houston, and 2 pretty decent hitting ballparks. And I believe the power is going to continue here for Garcia. And he's a must-own player right now, because on the season, like I said, he's up there with the home runs, and he's up there in the rankings. The next hit is Adolis Garcia of the Milwaukee Brewers. So Garcia, the former big-time Chicago White Sox prospect, he never panned out to be the top player many people thought he would be coming from Chicago. So now here with the Brewers on the season, so far 30 for 110, 4 home runs, 18 RBIs, 15 runs scored, 3 stolen bases, a 273 batting average, and a 347 on base here via Adolis Garcia. But in the last week here, in 20 at-bats, he's 10 for 20, batting 500 with 1 homer and 6 RBIs. And right here, this Brewer team, they need hitting in a bad way, in my opinion. And this guy, he's probably going to be an everyday starter for the rest of the year here, batting 4th in this cleanup spot here for this Brewer team. In the last few games for him, May 6th, he only pinched hit 1 for 1 at Philly. May 7th, 0 for 3 at Miami. May 8th at Miami, 3 for 5 with a homer and 2 RBIs. And yesterday, he was only a pinch hitter, once again 0 for 1. So right now, Garcia, he's hitting the ball well. But the Brewers, they just got to play him every day. Versus righties or lefties, it don't matter. I know his fielding isn't great, but they got to find an everyday spot for him, because this guy definitely can contribute. And fantasy owners, they should get ahead of the 8 ball here and pick him up in deeper leagues, in my opinion, where he's still available in 83% of fantasy leagues. The next hitter is Brandon Belt of the San Francisco Giants. Brandon Belt, it's been a good long career for him with San Francisco. And this season so far, he's been producing at a decent pace. Is about 21-93, 7 home runs, 19 RBIs. The batting average is very low though at 226, but a 354 on base percentage and 16 runs scored. So Belt, he's been a pretty decent average hitter throughout his career, and I think the average will get back up this season. Last year he batted 309. This year I know it's 226, but he's given a lot of power so far to fantasy owners with 7 home runs in the first 6 weeks here. But in the last week, he's really picked things up. Is Brandon Belt 6-19, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, 6 runs scored. That's a 316 batting average and a 458 on base. And right now, he's been added in 10% of fantasy leagues over the last couple days, but he's still out there in 67% of fantasy leagues, is Belt. So the last couple games here, May 4th in a doubleheader versus Colorado, 4 for 7, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs, 3 runs scored. May 5th at the Rockies, 0 for 3. May 7th, 0 for 4 versus San Diego. May 8th versus San Diego, 2 for 2 with a homer, 2 runs scored. And yesterday versus San Diego, 0 for 3 with a run scored. So Texas is coming to town here versus San Francisco. And then he's going to Pittsburgh, or the Giants and Belt. And if you need some first base or outfield help, Brandon Belt, he's definitely worth an addition to your fantasy roster, in my opinion. He's up there in the leaderboards with home runs. And this is a guy who's usually a good batting average hitter. And he'll break out of the slump, in my opinion, from the 220s. And he'll bump it up towards the 280s, 290s when the season's done. The next hit is Brandon Crawford, Brandon Belt's teammate of the San Francisco Giants. So Crawford, the last few seasons, he's been quiet for fantasy owners and the Giants. But now, this year, he's back at it, is Crawford. 20 of 86, 7 home runs, 18 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 15 runs scored, a 233 batting average, but a 323 on base, which is a good on base to batting average ratio. So right here, this Giant team, it looks like the philosophy this season is just try to crush the ball over the fence more than batting average in the early going. But over the last week here, Brandon Crawford's 5 of 13, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, a stolen base, 5 runs scored, a 385 batting average, and a 550 on base. So he's really getting things going in the last week, is Crawford, even with a little bit of a dinged-up calf that we saw him miss a few games earlier on last week. So the last few games here for Crawford. May 4th at Colorado, 3 for 3 with a homer, 2 RBIs, and 2 runs scored. May 5th at Colorado, 1 for 2 with a homer, 2 RBIs, a base, 2 runs scored. May 7th versus San Diego, 0 for 2. May 8th versus San Diego, 1 for 3 with a homer, 3 RBIs. And yesterday versus San Diego, 0 for 3 with an RBI. So Crawford, in the last 4 out of 6 games, he's got a home run here for this San Francisco team. And right here, this Giant team, they're going for the power. And Crawford at a weak shortstop position pretty much throughout fantasy baseball. He's definitely a player I would look to add because he could bring power to your team. I know the average ain't ideal, but he's on a hot streak right now. And he's also available in 83% of fantasy leagues, and he's definitely worth a pickup, in my opinion. The next hitter I would look to add is Jaime Calderonado, if I said that correctly here, of the Detroit Tigers. So Candelario, he hasn't done much here throughout his career, but this season with the Tigers so far, he's been pretty decent. 37 of 128, 3 home runs, 12 RBIs, 17 runs scored, a 289 batting average, and a 355 on base. So right here, he's getting a chance for the first time to really play every day. I know last season he played a lot, and he played pretty decent, but right here, the Tigers, they're playing him each and every day here, and he qualifies at first and third base in fantasy baseball, and he's available in 71% of fantasy leagues. But over the last week, he's been on a tear, 7 of 20 from the plate, 1 home run, 4 RBIs, 6 runs scored, a 350 batting average, and a 458 on base percentage here for Candelario. So the last few games for him, May 5th in Boston, 3 for 5, a homer, 3 RBIs, 3 runs scored. May 6th in Boston, 3 for 5, 2 runs scored, an RBI. May 7th versus Minnesota, 1 for 3 with a run. and May 8th versus Minnesota 0 for 4. And yesterday's ball game was rained out. So right here, he's hitting the ball well. And he's in a division as well where there's not many great teams or that good of pitchers in the AL Central. So Candelario, I think he could be a guy that definitely could be on your roster for most of the season this year, especially with his qualifications at the corner infield spots. And right now, he's definitely worth an ad in deeper league. The next hit is Robbie Grossman of the Oakland Athletics. So Grossman, he's got an everyday spot here with this A team pretty much, it seems like. So far in the season, 25 of 111, 3 home runs, 11 RBIs, 7 stolen bases. I know the batting average is poor at 225, but still a good on-base percentage with a poor average at 383 and 14 runs scored. But over the last week, Grossman, he's been one of the better players in fantasy baseball. 7 and 19, 1 home run, 4 RBIs, 5 runs scored, 3 stolen bases, a 368 on batting average, and a 538 on base percentage. So right here, Grossman, he's getting on base. He's stealing bases, which is pretty good at 7, up there as top on the leaderboard. So right here, he's giving a lot to fantasy owners besides the batting average, but he don't really strike out a lot. He puts the ball in play, and he's a guy that's hustled throughout his career because he don't know when his career's been over. He's just been a journeyman for the most part. In the last few games for him, May 4th at Boston, 3 for 3 with 3 RBIs, 2 stolen bases. May 5th at Boston, 0 for 4 with a run. May 6th at Boston, 1 for 5 with 2 runs scored and a bag stolen. May 7th versus Minnesota, 0 for 4. And May 8th versus Minnesota, 3 for 3 with a homer and 2 runs scored. So he's the catalyst, the top of the A's lineup, batting first, and him getting good stolen bases and starting to hit the baseball. He's a guy that more people should pay attention to because he's still available in 90% of fantasy leagues, and he definitely can help fantasy owners in a lot of different ways. The next hit is Wander Franco of the Tampa Bay Rays. So Wander Franco, a big-time prospect, and he's up there as one of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball is Franco, and he's already owned in 53% of fantasy leagues. And obviously, a few nights ago, the AAA season started, but Franco, I think they're going to polish him just a little bit more down there is Tampa Bay, because in my opinion, he don't have much left to prove, and the next couple weeks they'll bring him up, especially with, the ruling and the arbitration stuff. Some of these teams, they want that extra year of control, so they don't call up their top prospects until a month or two into the season. So Franco, I think we'll wait a little longer for him to come up for this Tampa team, but I definitely think he's ready, and this guy could be a big-time fantasy asset to help you win a lot of games in your league towards the end of the season here. But in my opinion, I think Franco comes up by June or July here with this Tampa team, and they're just letting him polish his skills, and like I said, trying to get that another year of arbitration under his belt. But right now, if he's available in your league and you got an NA spot where you could stash him, you definitely should go out there and get Wander Franco, because he's one of the best prospects in all of Major League Baseball. The next hit is Austin Hayes of the Baltimore Orioles. So Austin Hayes, he's pretty much come out of nowhere with this Baltimore team this season. Last year, I know he was up for most of the year, and he batted .279 in 122 at-bats, which isn't bad. But this year here with Baltimore, he's playing about 4 or 5 days a week, 21 of 81, 4 home runs, 12 RBIs, 16 runs scored, a .259 batting average, and a .318 on-base percentage. But over the last week, 7 of 25, no home runs, 2 RBIs, 4 runs scored, .280 batting average, and a good .357 on-base percentage here for Hayes. So Hayes, he's more of an ad in deeper leagues, but it wouldn't surprise me to see this kid really break out here for this Baltimore Oriole team. So the last few games from him, May 5th at Seattle, 1 for 4 with a run. May 7th versus Boston, 3 for 4. May 8th versus Boston, 2 for 5 with a run and 2 RBIs. And then yesterday versus Boston, 0 for 3 with a run. So Hayes, he's been batting second for this Baltimore Oriole team. And he's a player that's been pretty solid. He's a guy trying to learn his way here in the major leagues. And he's more of an ad, like I said, in deeper leagues, available in 80%. But he's not a bad ball player. And he's a guy that just goes out there each and every day, and maybe he could give you a few things. And the final hitter I would look to add on waivers here is Josh Harrison of the Washington Nationals. So Harrison, it's been a long career for him throughout the bigs, as obviously a pesky guy that's going to steal bases, a guy that's going to hustle, and a guy that plays great defense, and he fits that Washington National culture over there is Harrison. So far in the season, 25 of 86, 3 home runs, 12 RBIs, 12 runs scored, 1 stolen base, a 291 batting average, and a 378 on base percentage. So Harrison, like I said, he's another guy who's a catalyst for this Washington team. And he's been batting second this season behind Trey Turner for the most part. And his versatility in fantasy as well at second and third base is hard to find nowadays in fantasy baseball. So the last few games for him, May 6th versus Atlanta, 2 for 5 with a run and a stolen base. May 7th at the Yankees, 1 for 4, a homer, 3 RBIs, and 2 runs scored. May 8th, the Yankees 0 for 5. And yesterday versus the Yankees, 0 for 4. So right now, he's 0 for 9 in his last 2 games. But Harrison, he's going to have a part in this lineup each and every day here for this Washington team. And it's just a 2-game slump, in my opinion. I think he's going to break out of it and get things going. And he's available in 81% of fantasy leagues. And I don't think you could go wrong with Harrison. So that's a few hitters I would look to add on the waiver wire here in Week 6 of the fantasy baseball season.